Now, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Legal Issues webinar series brought to you in collaboration between the NCEA and Loyola Marymount University. My name is Thomas Pigg, and I am happy to host today's webinar about technology and online learning. Before I introduce today's presenter, we have a couple of housekeeping items. First, we encourage you to check out all the sessions and more information for this series on our Eventbrite page. We also welcome your feedback. So if you would like to share your experience with us, please complete the post-session evaluation for this session and others, which you can also access on the Eventbrite page. Our presenter today is Dr. Joy Lopez. Dr. Lopez is the Director of Technology at Sacred Heart Schools in Atherton, California. She's also an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco, where she teaches courses in the Masters in Educational Technology program, and at Norwich University, where she teaches courses on cybersecurity. She's at the forefront of educational technology in private schools and a frequent speaker at conferences on technology issues. Now, before I hand it over to her, let us begin, as we do all things, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We'll pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Now at this time, it is my pleasure to pass it off to Dr. Joy Lopez.
Thank you very much. Well, like all of you, this year has brought unprecedented changes. We all watched the news and tried to anticipate what COVID-19 would mean for us, our families, and our community. We had no idea what it would truly mean, however, and how it would change us, how it would change the world, and how it would change the educational system. Now we're at a point where we have to face a new school year, where we will have to be nimble and change quickly. Now's the time to look back on what we did, to figure out what we can do to move forward, and this presentation hopefully will help you do that. So as I was looking and processing through this spring, all along this whole, this line would come to me. And this is a line that was from The Godfather that Michael said to Tom, and he said, "You're not a wartime consigliere." And what this meant to us, what this meant to me, is that we are in an unprecedented time, and we are not prepared for this. Nobody has taught us how to handle a global pandemic. Nobody has been through this before. Yes, we've always had disasters. Every year schools are required to do things like fire drills, we do earthquake drills. People know what to do when that alarm rings. They know how to exit the classrooms, they know where to go. We practice for those, and we do it in a calm manner. But with COVID-19, there was no playbook. We had to design a plan for disaster, figuring things out on the fly. So on February 26, 2020, the admin team at my school sat down to discuss COVID-19. And it was causing closures all over schools in China. Now, my school is preschool through high school. So there are three different divisions on one big campus. I have a preschool kindergarten, 1st through 8th, and a high school. And we're all there together, about 1,200 students. On March 6th, a teaching partner and myself, Dr. Diana Neby, and I proposed a plan for the academic continuity in case of school closure. On March 9th, we created a new attendance code and started using it called Remote that was used for students who were going to have to remote into classes. And then on March 13th, the order came down from our governor, closing the state, closing all schools. We spent 2 days training teachers and getting them ready. And then on March 16th, we opened up preschool through high school fully online. So let's acknowledge that we did not sign up for this. No administrators or teachers were trained for this. And it is not what our parents expect or think that they're paying for. Didn't matter, the crisis happened anyway. And we, of course, have to be prepared and ready to deal with it. So how do you do that? And this is what I want you to start thinking about. I want you to think about this in terms of what you did in the spring and what you need to do moving forward. So what do we do? How do we do school? How do we do our planning and our delivery of teaching instruction. What are our policies around grading, absenteeism? What does absenteeism look like in a remote, a hybrid, or online version? How do we do student and teacher interaction face-to-face? And how do we do it online already? What are the tools that we use? Now, these tools are things such as your course management software, learning management software, whether you're using something like Seesaw, RazKids, or anything else. And then how do we, as our schools, build community? Now, once you've done that inventory and figured those things out, and it is a lengthy pursuit, but hopefully you'll be able to use some other documentation, maybe even some of your accreditation documentation to figure some of these things out. Now, what do you need to do to be able to do those things completely remotely or possibly hybrid? What gaps did you find that you need to fill? So this is what we found. So our current tools are Blackbaud K-12. We use that for all the grades, preschool all the way through. And our teachers mainly use that in the lower grades. They use the blogs where they post kind of the daily what's happening in our classroom. And that's where students go to check their grades, where attendance, parents can go in there and they can check transcripts. They can see what courses their students are enrolled in. We use Google for Education Suite for all. So we use it for our email, for our Google Docs, for our spreadsheets. In our high school, they use Schoology as the learning management system. And that is where teachers put assignments and students can turn things in online. Now, not all teachers use that, turning it in online. Some of them still like to have it in paper, but it has the ability for students to be able to submit online. We use Google Classroom in 4th through 8th grade. Again, that's where they can post assignments, students can do work, they can send work back to teachers. In our youngest grade, they use Seesaw in K-3. And again, teachers were not using Seesaw at all for receiving work. They were really only using it for distributing work at this time. What we found we were lacking were two main things. We knew that we could leverage our current tools and we could expand on those to really be able to fulfill a lot of our needs once we move to an online environment. However, what we were lacking was the ability to do face-to-face interaction. For that, we started to use Zoom. Our teachers knew how to use Zoom, only some of them as participants, but never how to run a Zoom room, never how to use it for teaching, how to do breakout rooms, how to bring people in, how to share their screens. The other thing that we were lacking was something to capture our screen or to capture somebody working out a math problem. So we were already using something called Screencastify in 6th through 8th grade. Our students were using it as well in those grades. And it's actually a Chrome extension, so it was really easy to get. We thought, great, we already have a small group that's already trained on this. We're going to expand that training and teach more people how to use it. So the next thing we needed to do was to build capacity. We needed to build capacity of our end users. We needed to train and prepare the community for this event. So when a crisis presents itself, you have to make sure that who's ever leading the pack, leading the training, leading the learning, leading the teaching, we need to make sure that they have the capacity to do that. In order to build capacity, one thing you have to keep in mind is you have to take a pause. So right now, we are in a place where we can pause a bit. When this happened back in March, we had 2 days. Now, we have time here in August to build that capacity before we launch our new school. So I encourage you to use this time to think about how you can prepare your faculty and staff to get to that point where, depending on what happens in the fall, which we all know is the great unknown, are we going to start with only a split herd? Are we going to start with everybody but social distance and all over our entire campus? Are we going to start fully remote? We don't know at this point. A lot of us don't know yet. So who are the groups that you need to assess and train? You need to assess their skills, and then you need to train them. And you need to train your faculty, because your faculty, although our faculty we found knew those tools that I showed you we had, most of them knew it, Some of them just knew a little bit to get by. Others of them knew it really well. And what we did is we sent out a survey and said, well, how well do you know how to do these things? Do you know how to post an assignment? Do you know how to grade an assignment? And then we asked them, not only do you know how to do it, but could you train others to do it? The reason we did that is to try to gather some people who could help us do more training. It also helped us identify those that we really needed to target with training. So you want to assess them, and then you want to be able to train them. With your administrators, what we found was we really needed to help them with communication. Communication is key, is going to be key, especially in any kind of shelter in place, if you're locking down, whatever it is that we're going to have to do, we have to communicate to our faculty and staff, and we have to communicate to our families. I'm sure you are all feeling the pressure right now from your families, just as we are, wanting to know exactly what's going to happen in the fall and what life is going to look like. Communication is incredibly important, and being able to communicate completely virtually is a very new thing. Student life personnel have another role. Now, at first when we went into our remote learning, student life really didn't play a role in it. We found that student life was kind of on the back burner at first because we really needed to get the academics rolling and moving. But it became critical as time went on, and we ended up having to end the year this way, that student life came back in and started offering opportunities for our students and faculty to take a breath. They started offering things like yoga and meditations, spirituality sessions. Some of our teachers started clubs with the students, started a new student little newspaper, anything that started to allow us to start building community and feeling some normalcy in our lives. So thinking about the fall, here's some things that we really need to be thinking about. And this is really what my technology team is focusing on for the fall. Matter of fact, I have several 11-month employees that are going to be working in July because I need them to help with this. We are looking at our new employees and our new students and even parent training for the fall. So our new employees, how are you going to inculcate your new employees in remote learning? Especially if we're not going to be able to see them face to face. Now, our goal at this point, and what it looks like so far in our state, in California, is that we will be able to bring them on small groups. So whether those groups are going to be one-on-one, or whether where we're all wearing masks, or whether I'm going to be able to bring maybe 6 in at a time to do personalized training, we are also developing virtual training. And we're going to have some virtual sessions with them to have them practice using the tools such as Zoom and how to do a breakout session. New students, how am I going to bring in new students? Our main entry points, of course, are in the youngest grades, and then 6th grade's a big entry point, and then of course high school is a huge entry point. How am I going to train those students in the normal technology tools that we would always train them in, like how to use Schoology and how to use the website and how to use Google? How am I going to train them with that and train them on remote learning? So we're trying to build that now for the fall. And we're looking at making courses for the new employees, courses for the students to do, and even some parent training. Now, my families are in the heart of Silicon Valley. We had anticipated that our parents would not have an issue with the technology when we moved remote. And we were wrong. In the younger grades, as many of you found who are teaching and have our principals or superintendents or teachers in the elementary grades, you know that those parents, on a day-to-day interaction in your class, they're not getting into Raz Kids or Seesaw or any of that. We even found parents who had never gone into the website to look at their kids' grades or attendance. So we know that we need to develop some training to help our parents. In those youngest grades, the parents are the ones who are going to log into the Zoom session for the child. The parents might be helping the child submit something through Seesaw. So we need to train the parents. And that's one of the things that we are thinking about for the fall to prepare for possible starting remotely. Another thing you have to do is prepare that home environment. Now, depending on the crisis, you may have time to prepare a home environment. We had very little time when COVID hit. We have more time now. So one of the things that you want to do is to survey your faculty and staff and say, okay, what do you need if we go back into being completely remote learning? Or potentially you have some that are going to only work remotely for health reasons or whatever, that they cannot come back to school. You need to survey them and find out, what is it they were missing? What did they need? Now, we found that quite a few of our staff really needed the double monitors. The business HR wanted a second monitor. So some of that's as easy as removing what's in their office and sending it home with them. In other cases, we found that faculty that on a day-to-day basis have no issues working on a laptop, when they were working all day on their laptop, they really had an issue with the small screen. And so we needed to try to provide some monitors for them to take it home. Our faculty also came back to us and said they really needed some document cameras. Now, not all of them, but my math teachers especially and science teachers. They really wanted some document cameras, and they wanted those so that they could write out problems. The science people wanted to be able to demo labs, and so they wanted to have a document camera on them so that they could demo underneath what was going on. We thought those were really interesting. Now, there's several different things that you can do for that. You can buy expensive document cameras, and that works for some. We found with others that I upgraded their iPad to where they could use a stylus, and they would log in with their iPad into Zoom, and then they would share their iPad screen, and then that's what they would do their writing on. Others of them, we got iPad holders, and there's actually the ones iPad stands that you put the iPad, and the iPad is looking down, and you turn it into a document camera. That is great if you have some older iPads. They don't have to be fancy. They just have to be able to log into Zoom and have a camera. And so for some people, that's what we set them up with as well. And we're going to continue that into the fall. Now, the other thing with this is reliable internet. Your faculty, your staff, and your students need reliable internet. And we found that that wasn't always the case. For many of our faculty, they might have lived in places in which their bandwidth was fine at home, but when they're at home with their spouse and their children all Zooming at the same time, they had no bandwidth. They lived in areas that didn't. Some of our faculty and staff preferred to come to school for that reason when they were doing Zoom sessions. We've had other people that have, went to families' homes if they could and used their bandwidth. Students were the same way. Now, many internet service providers came out with hotspots. They actually were gone after about 3 weeks, but they were offering them to families to take home hotspots so that they could have bandwidth. We spent quite a bit of time trying to help many of our students who were on scholarship get appropriate bandwidth so that they could actually work. So preparing that home environment is really important. We also found a lot of our business folks needed to VPN in, which hadn't been the case before. So that was something my department had to set up with them and teach them so that they would be able to access files that were on campus. So what are some of the lessons that we learned? Well, let's see. Bandwidth. Again, bandwidth. The more it is better. If you can do anything this summer, spend some time looking at the bandwidth on your campus. You might want to do things, I will be honest, I have deferred upgrading computers. I have a swap out cycle, and I've just decided this year I'm deferring that, and instead I'm putting more money into things like increasing access points, putting some in outdoor spaces that we didn't have them before in case we want to use some of our glorious outside spaces to have classes. We also found that it was kind of interesting that you could allow people to come onto your campus and stay in their cars and use your bandwidth if it reaches into your parking lots. My daughter-in-law actually had, as a teacher, and her bandwidth in her whole neighborhood went out. Well, she was teaching and she needed to be able to log in. So she went to her local public school And she asked them if she could just sit in their parking lot. She said she was a teacher, showed her ID, and they said absolutely. They had opened it up, and the public school had opened it up to their public school students to come there and to log in and to use the school's Wi-Fi. So there's creative ways to offer that. One thing we found was the time of day is a big issue. So if you can plan your remote classes to where they don't start on the hour. So in other words, don't have them start at 9 o'clock. Have them start at 9:15 or 9:30. It makes a world of difference with logging in. The other thing that we found is that on the West Coast, from 10 in the morning until noon, our bandwidth was just terrible. We had such a hard time getting on. But after noon, after about 12, when the East Coast was logging off, we were able to all of a sudden log in better. So think about the time of day. Think about when you're going to access these, how you're going to run the classes, and you might be able to adjust a little bit to get better bandwidth. Large group meetings. Now, many of you may not really have thought about this as much in the spring because we were all just trying to get by, but I'm sure you wanted to do some masses, you wanted to do town halls. We ended up getting Zoom webinars. It's pretty expensive, but we needed some way to allow enough people, a large number of people, to be in one Zoom meeting at a time. And we were able to use this for mass, for a couple of town hall meetings we had with parents. We used it for our freshman welcome night, and they even used it for some class meetings, so the entire lower middle school could be together at one time. Think about how you could possibly leverage that. Could your diocese purchase a webinar room and maybe you all share it? Could you purchase some of the large meeting rooms and then maybe you could share it? Think about creative ways that you can actually have some of those things that we hold sacred to be able to do, that community that is so important in our schools. How can you leverage that moving forward? Something else to think about, and this may not concern all of you. We happen to have nurses and we have counseling staff that does personal counseling. We needed to find a way for them to be able to do video conferencing that was HIPAA compliant without it costing an arm and a leg. The medical teleconferencing is very expensive to do. So DoxyMe there's a free version of it that works really quite well. I know a lot of personal counselors who are using it in their own practices, and ours used it as well. So you might check out DoxyMe if you need a HIPAA compliant video conferencing for some of your families. Zoom also offers a HIPAA compliant one. And if you are getting a lot of Zoom rooms, like we had to do, and a lot of Zoom users, because we're pretty large, we were able to get that a HIPAA compliant for some of our people for free. And it just threw that in. So that was really, really helpful. Video recording. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Zoom and some of the security issues in a second. But before I do that, I want to talk about video recording and what you need to be considering and thinking moving forward. And again, this all hit us so rapidly when we shut down in the spring. But for video recording, what do you do about students who can't be photographed? So right now we have an opt-out where if our families don't want their students photographed, and we probably have in our school about 20 a year, mostly in our youngest grades. By high school, it's not as much of an issue, but they can't be photographed. Well, what about recording in Zoom? If we want to record and have students who weren't there be able to view that, are we able to record those students? A lot of that's going to depend on where you're going to post those video links. So you really need to consider a handbook edition. And I will talk about a few other handbook editions, but this is one I think you really need to think about. A handbook edition saying, we're recording these video sessions and we are posting them. This is where we will post them. We post ours internally only. They cannot be accessed from the outside. And because we do that, and we've let those families know, our principals actually personally reached out to each one of those families and had them sign an agreement in the spring so that we were able to record them, because that was definitely a concern that we had. So a few more tools. these are some questions that you need to answer. So you need to be thinking about this, and some of you may have already made decisions. Many of us are still kind of in a waiting phase right now. In California, we're in a surge, and we're not quite sure what our governor is going to allow us to happen. Of course, we're looking at federal, state, and local as far as what they're doing. And our county has been very, very tight. So, but what are you going to do if you offer are you going to offer a fully online track? In other words, can parents opt for a fully online track to where they never come? Are you going to have hybrid? Are you going to rotate blocks? And if you do that, are you going to broadcast a live class to students who have to stay home, whether they are sick, whether they have to quarantine for 14 days, or whether they are choosing to stay out? If you're going to broadcast, you need to really think about how you're going to do that. You don't want to broadcast a talking head. It's really kind of boring. So you need to think about what you're going to do. You're not going to be able to see a screen very well if you're broadcasting. If you're having a camera in the back of the room and it's shooting up at the front where the teacher's writing on the whiteboard, the child at home is not going to be able to see that whiteboard. Instead, what you need to do is have the teacher do like we're doing, share the screen. The screen is then projected in the classroom, and the child at home sees the teacher writing on it. The children in class see that it broadcast up on a screen. And that just takes a little bit of planning. So what do you need to do that with? What are the tools? There's several different tools out there, and at the end you'll see my contact information. I'm happy to give you information. We're going to be using something called Swivels and Owls in some of our classes, but there's also very easy ways to just put up an iPad, have it in Zoom, and the student can see the class if your goal is to have the student just be part of the class. And there's some real benefits to that as well. So those are some of the decisions that you need to think about. So in the spring, one of the wonderful things that happened is we learned a new vocabulary words, and that was called video bombing or Zoom bombing. So in April, Zoom admitted that it had a huge security breach, and there was an issue where a lot of users' data was stolen. And in addition, hackers were Zoom bombing. Now, this did happen to us in only, I think, 2 classes. They were pretty innocuous, but somebody came in and just started putting a bunch of garbage in the chat. And the teacher very quickly knew, because we had taught them, how to eject that person and to ban them from the room. Then we also taught our teachers, and these particular teachers had not done that, set it up to where they had to have a waiting room. Now, Zoom came back with a whole bunch of updates and updates and updates, and you probably remember those if you were using Zoom. And one of the things is that they mandatory require a waiting room, so that when a user comes in, they're in the waiting room and the teacher can admit them. So if there's somebody they don't know, they don't admit them. We had students changing their names, so we had to not allow that. We have created it to where only authenticated users can be in Zoom. Teachers can opt for that. And what that means is that if your email address ends at shschools.org, you can get into those Zoom rooms if the teacher so designates. Now, a teacher can leave it open, and they would do that in cases like a guest speaker. They want a guest to come in and talk to the kids that doesn't have one of our email addresses. They can come in as a non-authenticated user, and the teacher can let them in. So there's lots of settings in any video conferencing you use, and you just need to check those security settings, and then you need to teach teachers how to do those security settings. So online behavior, this is some handbook stuff that you really, really need to look at. I know somebody else is doing a session on handbooks, but this is something that we hadn't done before that truly needs to be updated. So you need to include a section on virtual hybrid classes. You just do. You need to call it out now for what it is. So you need to talk about students being respectful, that everything that happens in our face-to-face applies here. In other words, we don't want you on your cell phones. We don't want a bunch of distractions going on. We don't want you sitting there chewing gum and chomping your gum. We want you to sit up, sit at a chair. We don't want your bed in your bedroom. Okay, we don't want you broadcasting from there. You need to be remaining active and engaged and visible unless the teacher says otherwise. Now, we allow students to use virtual backgrounds as long as they're appropriate. And the reason we do that, and our teachers do as well, and as you can see from mine, that's a virtual background of our lower middle school chapel and our administrative building. So we actually created a bunch of virtual backgrounds, and then we also gave directions on how to create your own. And the reason we did that and we allow people to use that is because some of our students live in small homes and they don't want people to see the background. Some of our teachers don't want kids to see where they live, or they have nowhere else to Zoom from except in a studio apartment with their bedroom right there. So they use virtual backgrounds. So as long as those are appropriate, and we need to just call that out that it's appropriate, then that's okay. The other thing we said is that they need to be in appropriate attire. So we want them to look good, like they're at school. I don't want their jammies. We want them to be appropriate. So think about what you need to expand in your acceptable use policy and put that in for next year. Some considerations, and this is a lot here, but I just want to make sure that we don't forget these things. Now, I wish I had the answers to all of these thoughts here. I think we're just at the beginning of feeling the iceberg of this coming at us. While most crises only last a few days to a few weeks, this current one's going to last a very long time. The parents want to feel like they're getting their money's worth. And I know that there were many schools that were hit with parents saying they wanted to reduce tuition for the spring and tuition refunds. And we had to deal with that. We also know that there was an increased need for certain kinds of technology, for software. We did offer some stipends to our faculty for because they were having to use their network at home. We had some increased need for some of our students. And in order to do some of that, I was able to pull some Chromebooks that were on carts and send those home with some kids because they didn't have technology at home. The other thing is HR considerations. You might be seeing this at this point. Some teachers may decide they do not want to come back to teach. And part of that may be that it is just too much for them to manage their own children's schedule with their schedule, especially if they're varied. Others may just find that, you know what, this remote teaching gig that they may have to do is not for them, and they decide that they're going to bow out. Additionally, we may have some teachers who want to keep working from home, immunocompromised, older age, whatever it is. They're caring for somebody who is immunocompromised at home, and I don't have the answers. That's something you're going to have to figure out. We're seeing an increase in people wanting home ergonomics. And so we are providing the ability for them to figure out what ergonomic work environment looks like, first off, to start with that. And what do you have at home that helps you ergonomically? And then what is it that the school needs to provide you to help with that as well? Some schools are looking at home office reimbursements. If you have to purchase something, if you need an extra screen, the school maybe doesn't have that. Maybe we can find a used one somewhere, but maybe you can find one and we can reimburse you for that. So these are just considerations, and I put them up here merely as something for you to be thinking about, because I'm sure you are most of these already. So other considerations. Communal devices in our area are not going to happen this year. In our libraries, I have a bunch of computers that kids can log on and look up books. Those are going to have to go. We have a computer lab at our lower middle school. That has to go. I'm still uncertain as to what I'm going to do about our, we have some art classes in the high school, that's photography and art classes that use, nice computers, but they're shared devices. And we can't have that unless somebody's going to be in charge of really cleaning those up. The mouse, the tables, the keyboards, everything, every time a student uses them. So in my computer lab, I'm pulling all the computers. In the library, I'm pulling all the computers. Those spaces in, and I'm just tucking them away. I'm also using them as additional monitors if a teacher needs to take one home. We can loan those out. And then instead, in those spaces where that computer lab was, the principal now has an extra classroom to play with. So if we need to split the herd, if we need to have kids in different rooms, we can use that. We can use the library space as a classroom. It actually has a projector and everything already. So why not use that actually as a classroom? Now, athletics might be something that we are all, we know that that is really dictated. Our athletics is totally dictated often by their own board, their own programs. And so we have to take the lead on what they're going to do during this crisis. But you might want to think about how you can support them. If we go remote or if we go hybrid, your parent association and school board, they're still going to need to meet. So maybe consider that webinar option some way, or give them a Zoom room that they can use. What are you going to do about the extracurricular activities and those specialty classes? Many of us have teachers that are hired in specialty fields such as art and drama and music that teach those sort of things, or librarians, and they're maybe not going to be able to work the same way if we were to go fully remote, just like in the spring. In the spring, we got by. Maybe they did some stuff, but we didn't really fully utilize them. How can we fully utilize them this year to keep them working? Maybe some way if we split the herd and have them watching some classes that maybe those students are working remotely, but at school. If you need kids that it's safer for them to be at school, maybe there's some way we can repurpose those people in other ways. Or maybe they can come up with incredibly creative things. Our PE department knocked it out of the park. They created an entire video library of every kind of exercise you can think of and how to do it. They created little games like, use the letters of your name to find a different activity, and then you do that. They created things for students to do. And then they even held virtual yoga classes and, boot camps and things. It was pretty amazing. So think out of the box here about what you can do and what these people can do. So in conclusion, I just want to say that some people say, do we have to design 3 different ways? Do we have to design face-to-face, hybrid, and fully online? And the answer is no. First up, you already got the face-to-face down. You know how to do face-to-face. You don't have to design anything. If those kids come back on campus, sweet, we've got that one down. But what about the hybrid? Well, you don't have to plan for hybrid yet either. What you need to plan for, what is the most difficult to plan for, is fully online. We can't do what many of us did in the spring, where we took what we do on ground and put it online. A lot of that does not work. To be fully online means fully online. You need to plan online first. Then, if you get to be hybrid, if you have that opportunity, which hopefully we will at least all come back to that in the fall, if you have hybrid, you pull out those things that make the most sense to do face-to-face and allow others of it to be done remotely. We know how to do the face-to-face. So just pull those out, keep that online going, because you're going to have students who are going to be fully online. I guarantee you. At least you've already had that built for them then. So I want to just kind of give you my contact here then as well. So here's my email address, jlopez@shschools.org. I'm the Techno Maven on Twitter. Here is a site that I'm going to stop the share for a second, and I just want to show you this site on our website, which might help you. One of the things that we found that parents wanted was they really wanted the ability, and let me see if I can find this very, very quickly. I'm sorry, I thought I had this up already. We wanted to be able to show them what we are doing about online learning, because we needed to show it not just for our current parents, but also for our admissions. Because as you guys know, admissions is starting already. People are looking, what are you doing? What is your school going to be like? And so what we did is we designed a page on the outside of our website. So you're free to go to this and check it out. And you can dig deep in here. And we've given you things about the day in the life of these students and what we're doing, what is our philosophy. And you can actually go in here and see some of the real-time learning and what we're doing for our different grades. Step into a day in the life of a kindergarten. Now we put this on the outside specifically so that we could show our families what we are doing and show prospective parents what we're doing. So I encourage you to take a look at this. I'll be honest, we saw other schools doing it and we were like, ooh, we better do that too. And it has really been helpful. Our admission teams has really been very grateful for having this. So again, please feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to share any tools that I'm using and anything else that you might have. Thomas, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Lopez, for being with us today and sharing these resources with us. So if you all have not done so already, you can access the post-session evaluation as well as other updates on this webinar series on our Eventbrite page. We hope that you enjoyed the session, invite you to take advantage of our other sessions in the series. Have a blessed rest of your day and see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.